Chances are, if you clicked on this video, you're already probably pretty hyped for Genshin Impact version 4.1's upcoming release, and you've probably already seen at least a few other people's analyses on this banger of a trailer. But I'm not gonna do that today. We're not doing analyses, okay? Hoyo has this really strong track record of making incredibly misleading trailers for their upcoming versions, so rather than pick this thing apart frame by frame or tell you what I think you'd missed, I'd instead like to share all of the things that I'm thinking about going into version 4.1, providing that those thoughts have some basis within the trailer itself to back them up, because I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of unanswered questions coming out of 4.0 that I think 4.1 will be able to shed some light on. We're only going to cover a few of them today, but if that sounds good, then let's just start by talking about the simple stuff first and then move on to the more complex stuff. Going into this trailer, we have to keep in mind that it's covering Acts 3 and 4 of the Archon quests, as well as both Wriothesley and Neuvillette story quests, and seamlessly jumping between the events in all of them. And that includes using visuals from one quest overlaid with audio clips from another quest, and that's how they mislead you very easily. Now, there's a section in the trailer where some people are yelling about how Melusines and Neuvillette can't be trusted. This almost certainly happens in Neuvillette's story quest and won't be a plot point in the Archon quest. I just feel like that needs to be made clear. For those of you who don't know, the Melusines were born from the fell dragon Elenus's flesh when a ton of Gardamex exploded inside of him. Neuvillette was the one who found the Melusines and brought them to the court of Fontaine, thereby making him the one responsible for them all. I would imagine that bringing these weird little creatures who see the unseen would be disturbing for a lot of people, and it's probably a sore spot for Neuvillette as a whole. Neuvillette also talks about how he doesn't really understand himself that well in the trailer, which is why he doesn't emote effectively. And he also appears to have some rather self-deprecating view of himself, as per the final line of the trailer where he says he's not worthy of our respect. This is far more self-deprecating in the Chinese text than it is in English. So, to me, it sounds like his story quest is really going to be more of a journey through his past and some self-discovery, which is kind of cool because everyone's kind of in agreement that this guy is a dragon at this point, so kind of getting to know the inner workings of a dragon that's not, contractually obligated not to say anything, I'm looking at you, Zhongli, sounds like it might be kind of cool. However, I don't think his story quest includes this scene here where he's pushing back the waters. I think that's the Archon quest, but that leads me into my next thought. Furina is very absent from this trailer, visually anyway, but her voice appears in two very important sections. The first is where she begs for her life, presumably when facing Arlecchino, because I can't imagine who else would instill such fear in her. And I've seen around places that some people think that she's, putting on a show, that she's acting, that she's being overdramatic, and I don't think that's actually the case. I do think she's legitimately scared for her life because the way I see Furina, she is just a scared kid putting on a very brave front who actually has no idea what she's supposed to be doing, but she's still trying her best. And honestly, this feels very, very similar to Nahida. She also had those moments of extreme insecurity, of not knowing what to do and feeling like she was failing to live up to the expectations of everyone that, threw whatever they thought she should be doing upon her. And, even A had this happen to her in her own way, not being able to live up to what Makoto set out to do. So I guess this kind of implies that all of the newer Archons experience this sort of crippling anxiety, I guess. Plus, Furina avoids conflict of all types. Every time she's been challenged to an actual physical fight, she backs down with a very nervous excuse. So I think this is legit. But her second appearance is far more interesting. It's in this scene with Neuvillette, who's forcing back the primordial waters. But I think this is an instance where the audio and the visuals don't actually go together. Hoyo does this mixing and matching a lot in their trailers. Anyway, the line that she says is,
"You will see much in the human world, from the delightful to the depressing. And one day, when you have dwelt among humanity long enough, you will be placed to bring judgment over all as a spokesperson for Fontaine's past."
Now, by content alone, this voice sounds like it should belong to the former Archon, Agaria, but the voice actually does belong to Furina. It's something that's a lot more obvious in languages besides English. But the line itself does also seem like it should be directed towards Neuvillette since he's the one on the screen and all that kind of stuff, but The line explicitly states that you will be placed to bring judgment over all, and that's the role of Furina explicitly. In every source in-game so far, this duty of judging everything, including other gods, is always placed on Furina. So by that logic, this voice is Furina talking to Furina. And that's not actually as weird as you might think it is. See, Neuvillette tells us early on that Furina is quite preoccupied with the prophecy left behind by Agaria, and this leads me to believe that Agaria's prophecy had more parts to it than the people of Fontaine were initially aware of. Agaria's prophecy, by this logic, isn't necessarily one of destruction, but a passing on of responsibilities to her successor, and everything else kind of got lost in translation. The line in the trailer, in my opinion, is Furina repeating the prophecy of Agaria to herself, reminding herself of her duty and achieving a new level of understanding in what it is she actually needs to do to thwart this, apocalypse that's coming, this great flood, right? That's my take, anyway, but we'll see how this holds up in the end. It could very well be that Furina is talking to Neuvillette, but for now, I'm super skeptical. I just don't think that's the case. So 4.1's main area that we get to go to is the Fortress of Meropide, which is this underwater prison type thing. Honestly, I don't have a whole lot to say about Meropide right now, but what we do know for sure is that it's a Gardamek manufacturing facility, at the very least, and that those who enter Meropide are usually those who have been decreed guilty by the Oratrice, and they very rarely leave. Wriothesley comes off as pretty antagonistic in this trailer, but I kinda doubt that'll end up being the case. I mean, he's playable, after all, and most playable characters aren't really antagonistic towards the Traveler at the very least, so there's that. But on the other hand, if you ignore that, right, Wriothesley is Meropide's new system administrator, and he has recently laid down a ton of new rules and stuff. So it would make sense that there's probably a lot of stuff regarding the fortress that he just doesn't know about yet, and I think it's also very likely that he has his own methods of cleaning up the messes left behind by previous admins and investigating any strange occurrences. Although I doubt he can investigate anything that openly, right? A place like Meropide needs very strict rules and chains of command, so anything out of the ordinary Wriothesley does would have to be kept on the down low. I think primordial waters might be one of the things he's investigating. Now, it's very hard to pinpoint what parts of this trailer would be his quest versus part of the Archon quest, but I would guess that the Flood of Primordial Waters is part of the Archon quest, at the very least, and that his story quest will probably involve more prison dynamics and, urban myth-type things that go on within the fortress, right? That said, there are a couple lines about Meropide that have me thinking about something entirely different, but far more interesting. Rumor has it that after Wriothesley took over, some prisoners like staying in Meropide so much that they decide to continue to stay there even after they finish their sentences. And with that in mind, there's one line in the trailer that kind of puzzles me. It goes, "Since they have no way to dispose of the leftover remains, they have ways to transform them into other forms and keep them in the fortress forever." Now, I don't know about you, but the leftover remains bit kinda feels like it might be referring to people, like humans. I mean, it might not, but there's this one shot of Wriothesley running away from a flood of primordial water, and that means that there's a buttload of primordial water in the fortress, which is super weird because just why is it here? Why is it in a prison of all places? Unless this primordial water is related to those leftover remains. I'm going on a crackpot tangent for a second, so bear with me. There is this ongoing theme in Fontaine of a person's consciousness being reduced to a liquid form, meaning this water, this primordial water, is just the distilled and liquefied memories of people. And this is a pattern we've actually seen reoccurring, just not as overt as it's been in Fontaine. I made the case in my 4.0 recap video and in my recent Dotori video that the primordial waters have similarities to the sanctifying essence item, for example. This item is actually liquefied memory juice, and it is used to level up artifacts which are crystallized memories. It also looks weirdly similar to the Melazine's True Sight potion, and this is the stuff that made this one Melazine see 3 moons in the sky when there's only one, so that's a nice little fun side note. But while the primordial waters are currently linked explicitly to Fontaine, given its similarities to the sanctifying essence, I am inclined to believe that they're not actually Fontaine exclusive. In fact, I have every reason to believe that Irminsul's roots, aka the ley lines, suck up water to nurture the tree, but since this is a magic tree, it would require magic water. So if memories and elemental energy flow within the ley lines and primordial waters are memory water, then the primordial waters might flow within Irminsul. You see where I'm going with this? And we know that people are reduced to just their memories after they die and then they're put into Irminsul, right? So this whole, liquid consciousness thing is not a stretch and it's not new. It's just not been explicit. Incidentally, Remuria, the civilization that preceded the court of Fontaine, had a god king, kind of like Deshret, who was named Remus, and he literally turned people into a golden Ichor through, some shenanigans with the primordial waters. And he then combined that golden Ichor with the immortal stone to create these things called golems, which were basically people who then transcended their human bodies and became eternal. So, basically liquid minds, robot bodies. If you've watched my latest video on Dottore, then you'll understand more of why this matters. But if you didn't, here's the only TLDR that you need to know. There's a dude from about 500 years ago named René Petrichor who literally tried to do exactly what Remuria did and liquefy all of Fontaine's people into one giant oceanid-like being, which he could then implant into robot bodies, thereby making them able to survive the inevitable apocalypse. The funny thing is, though, in that Dottore video, I said that Petrichor was the scent of rain, and that's true, but Hoyo may have done a funny here and referenced the fact that Petrichor is actually made up of two word portions, Petra and Ichor, so stone and primordial water, meaning René's weird constitution, because apparently he had a body akin to the sacred lotus left behind by Agaria instead of like a normal human body, might actually be because he was a kind of golem, or something similar. Is it golem? I think it's golem. So the fact that Meropide is a Gardamek manufacturing facility and it's full of primordial water is just really suspicious in this new context, okay? But what's even stranger than that is that Ichor means the blood of a god in Greek mythology, and its use in Fontaine is also not unique. Oribashi's Ichor turned into the lightning all over Yashiori Island. Durin's Ichor fed the frost-bearing tree. A's character story also talks about how the Muso Ishin blade dripped with Ichor during the Archon War, meaning Ichor is a type of god blood in Genshin too, and seems to frequently refer to dragons and is often seen alongside instances of the abyssal destruction. Now, it's said that Remus's golden Ichor was eventually stained black by the painful cries of all the souls that it contained, and this is so weirdly similar to the Jinn of Gurabad being forcibly placed into robot bodies, which is an incident that caused them incredible pain and suffering and eventually ended with the rebellion and the Abyss swallowing the entire city. So, another pattern. Now, the Remurian golems were also described as a race as black as iron with arcane lithos for skin and Ichor for blood, and I don't know about you, but when I hear that, I immediately think of the Black Serpent Knights. Black stonish bodies? Check. Weird glowing liquid in their cores? Check. Hollow husks made up of leftover memories of real people? Check. It is a very disturbing pattern, especially if we look back at consecrated beasts who were animals that ate god flesh and transcended into these magic armored monster things. It's kind of a similar pattern. And honestly, I kind of feel like this deserves its own video once we get more information on it, but there's no way I'm going to finish that before 4.1, and I also just don't have all the information I need to do it right now. So consider this just something to keep in the back of your mind as you wander through Meropide, and also the Fontaine Research Institute, because we're apparently going to go there as well. They just didn't really showcase it that much as far as I could tell. Although that is my cue to also point out that some of these shots in the trailer may not actually be in Meropide, but in the Fontaine Research Institute instead, and I think that at this point it would be impossible to say which is which, so, I'm just saying. One last thing that's been on my mind recently is Enkanomiya, and I am not alone in that. Some folks on my Discord, and especially on Reddit, are noticing a lot of similarities between Fontaine, Remuria, and Enkanomiya. This is something I was really skeptical of at first, but now I'm kind of on board. I have been convinced. See, Enkanomiya is inspired by ancient Greece, whereas Remuria is based on ancient Rome, and the two obviously have a ton of overlap in mythology and even follow the pattern of Greek being established first, with the Romans coming in to assimilate the Greeks and much of their culture later on. Now, I'm not saying Enkanomiya is Remuria, I'm just pointing out some odd connections between the two. Take Child, for example. His real name is Ajax, which is Greek, and his weaponry is extremely similar to the stone weapons found in Enkanomiya. And this guy just so happens to be part of a major plot point in Fontaine, which is basically future Remuria, huh? Plus, his master Skirk is someone who I have connected to the Greek sorceress Circe. See this video for more information on that. And Circe is often called a witch, and she's a great candidate for a member of the Hexen Circle, the most visible member of which is Alice, and Fontaine is full of her namesake Alice in Wonderland references, which is made weirder by the fact that this one book from Enkanomiya lists Eris as an important individual, and that name is written in other languages, like Japanese, the same way you would write Alice, which would be a tenuous connection, except Eris was known for using her golden apple of discord to sow strife, while the chaotic Alice was the owner of the Golden Apple Archipelago. Plus, all these structures in Fontaine are weirdly similar to those of the Helios in Enkanomiya, and a riddle in one of the Byakuyokoku chronicles describes Neuvillette right down to his cane, calling him the dragon of water in human form. And let's not forget that the Sin Shades were originally called Eidolons by the people of Enkanomiya, kinda like the Hydro Eidolons. And then there's Orobashi, a huge white snake that lost a battle against Morax and fled, eventually becoming the god of Enkanomiya instead. But okay, this is kind of crackish, but the only other white snake that we know of is Changsheng, and she's from Chenyu Vale, which borders Fontaine and Liyue, and sure, okay, that connection is tenuous at best, but there's too many weird coincidences. You see what I'm feeling? Anyway, I'll leave a couple of really good Reddit posts on this topic in the description box because I don't really want to cover them all here right now, but man, they are really worth considering, okay? Obviously, I did not cover everything here, but I think this is a pretty accurate depiction of where my head's at going into 4.1, so that'll do for now. Now, while the names of my super supportive channel members scroll on by, I'll touch on a couple more tiny things just to fill the gap. In the special program, Neuvillette claims to like the water from Mondstadt the best, and this is a really cool nod to Venti, as he worked really hard to keep the waters perfect for making wine and cider because the brewing process is very sensitive to changes in the water that's used. Now, I know a lot of people have been making fun of his hobby of water tasting, but believe it or not, water sommeliers are actually a real thing. It sounds ridiculous at first, but water can taste very different depending on where you get it from. It's no different from wine tasting, really. I just told you about the connection between brewing and the quality of the water, right? It makes a big difference. It's actually been suspected that one of the reasons that New York style pizza is so special, the dough is so special, is because New York's water is very soft and it's not chlorinated, as far as I know. With that kind of water, you're able to get a very soft dough, and the yeast is able to inflate very easily because the chlorine's not there to kill anything off. So water is very, very important as an ingredient, okay? He's not that crazy. I also thought it was very interesting that Lenny was freaking out over Risley taking his siblings, and I'm not really sure how they got to this point. Lynette going missing has me a little bit confused. She must have been sent to investigate the prison somehow, or maybe Lenny and Lynette were tried for other crimes and then sent to Meropide? Or maybe Neuvillette agreed to have them go with the Traveler undercover? I'm not really sure. Fremine, on the other hand, kind of makes some sense to me, right? Investigating the Oratrice might also mean investigating where the guilty go, so perhaps his job was to infiltrate Meropide all along, because, he's a diver, that's his specialty, and Meropide is an underwater thing. I mean, that makes more sense to me than anything else, but what doesn't make sense to me is why he's always drowning in these trailers. He likes being underwater. Why is he drowning? I'm so confused. We're just gonna have to wait and see on that one. Okay, but I think that's all for me for today, though, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful and or interesting. I'm going to catch you all in version 4.1, so take very good care of yourselves and make like Neuvillette and drink plenty of water. Good water. Tasty water. Yum, 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 yum. Is it Ichor or Ichor? Is it Ichor? Ichor? Words are hard.